All right, welcome back to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. This week you've got myself and Nick, and we're talking about a lot of pushbacks again. It feels like we're just kind of in this eternal cycle of, we're like Charlie Brown kicking the football, where we're like, yes, the movies are here. And then as soon as it gets time for them to come out, they just get yanked away. So there were a pretty big slate of new release dates for a lot of movies from Sony, and then a few non-Sony movies as well. So No Time to Die is the big one, which has been moved back quite a few times. This was originally supposed to come out last April and then was supposed to come out last November. Was going to release on the same day as Soul, got pushed back, was going to be this April, and is now back to October 8th of this year. I think it'll probably keep this release date because just looking at all of the trends and expectations for the COVID vaccine and, you know, what you want to call normalcy as far as movie going is concerned, is supposed to be early to mid fall, maybe even late summer in the US. So I think No Time to Die has finally found its home. We can only hope, but it's moved again.
I feel like every single week we come on and we do one of two podcasts where there's the 1 week where it's like, whoa, like stuff released. Look at all the fun things we actually got to watch this week. We got Wonder Woman and Soul and all these other things, or whatever other week it is. And then there's this version where it's just like, oh yeah, this movie got pushed for its third time. Looking forward to seeing that at some point whenever it comes out. Fingers crossed. Yeah, it's really interesting with No Time to Die, because I feel like this is the last time it will move, is my guess. That's my totally reasoned, have a lot of sourcing take on this, because I feel like at this point, MGM, they have like nothing else going on. We have Disney, they have Disney Plus, and then you have Netflix, that's just streaming is their thing. Then you have Warner Brothers with HBO Max. They can kind of diversify a little bit, whereas MGM just kind of is just like, we need No Time to Die to do really well, and we need it to be in theaters, but we also need to release it because we don't have a lot of other money coming in. So I feel like at this point, this is going to be the last time. I don't know what else they can do at this point, you know, where it's just, I think they can't really risk pushing it back again. But I mean, I feel like there's so many different circumstances with it. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see this movie. I don't know if I will though.
Yeah, and it's odd because this movie was already like delayed pre-COVID. So by the time this actually releases in October, it'll be almost 2 years since its original release date, which was November of 2019. And then you had just issues with Danny Boyle leaving, and it just the fact that like Daniel Craig, it seems like really didn't want to come back for another Bond movie. This will have been 6 years since the last Bond film, which came out in 2015. 9 years since the last Bond film we're thinking about, which came out in 2012. And so this movie just kind of feels late anyways. But I think, yeah, it'll probably, hopefully, maybe stick to its current October 2021 release date.
And then you got Cary Joji Fukunaga just like delaying days of shooting because he's playing Xbox or whatever. What were those reports that came out where it was just like he's just in there playing COD or whatever, so we're not shooting until another hour from now or something like that. And then I think Daniel Craig like broke his ankle during shooting. So is there a chance that this movie is just terrible? Like we've been waiting for so long. It finally comes out and it's just a giant turd, because I feel like that's definitely a possibility.
I'm not convinced that this isn't a Knives Out sequel, because you've got Daniel Craig and Ana de Armas reuniting. So there's just,
I like this. This is big brain.
There's nothing, but it could be everything. Yeah, and I just feel like the franchise kind of went off, specifically the Daniel Craig era, kind of went off the rails with Spectre when MGM got the rights to Blofeld and the whole Spectre organization back, and they kind of threw out their plan with Quantum, which was like the big Spectre-y bad guys from the second and a little bit of the third movie. And they were like, well, we have to force this in because now we have this toy in our sandbox and we can't not use it. And so hopefully I want No Time to Die to be a little bit more grounded. Probably not, but I can always hope.
I don't think I can remember anything about Quantum of Solace. I couldn't tell you a single thing about that movie. So that's where I am kind of with their shadowy figures.
Somebody drinks some type of car liquid. That's what I remember.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't really know because I feel like at this point you watch the trailer and it looks like it's 10 different movies because they're bringing back Lea Seydoux and then Christoph Waltz as Blofeld, and I feel like it's the culmination, right? In terms of it's the end of the Daniel Craig story, but it feels like they're like sloshing together like 5 different things. So I'm hoping it's, I mean, isn't it like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that? It's like some insane like Dark Knight Rises runtime. So I don't know. I feel like at this point with all of these movies that are getting pushed back, including my beloved Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway, which I can't wait for. But I feel like I'm prepared for all of these to be terrible, even though obviously there's been so many different circumstances why these things have moved. But I feel like at this point, I don't want to get my hopes up. It really is like Charlie Brown. We're like, oh, I'm so excited to do this. Oh, and then it gets pushed back. Then, oh, I'm so excited. It's pushed back again. Then we'll finally watch it in 2025 and it'll just be a giant pile of shit. So until we can actually go to theaters again, which who knows? I think, like you said, the fall looks like it's a reasonable time frame. We'll probably, both of us will probably have our vaccines by then, like fingers crossed. I'm just gonna say yeah, these are things that are happening, but I don't really have much of an opinion until they come out because I think we've built ourselves up and then broken everything down again when the release date gets shifted. And then there's coronavirus spikes again that I don't want to get hurt again, is what I'm saying. I'm too emotionally damaged at this point.
You should get a classic damage tattoo like the Joker in the hit movie Suicide Squad.
There's just so much subtlety to that tattoo, you know? Like you see that and it says damaged and he's also damaged. It's a metaphor. It's
big brain. But the one thing I think we should be talking about in No Time to Die is Billy Magnussen is in the movie, and he was the colorful prince in Aladdin from like Sweden or something like that. But he also had the show-stopping number with Chris Pine in Into the Woods. So if we don't get some crazy show-stopping Billy Magnussen moment in this Bond movie, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Is that how you say his name? I've always been saying Billy Magnussen. I have no idea.
I've never heard it said aloud, so I'm just going off.
I don't know. He is. I hate that new Aladdin, but he is so funny in that movie. I feel like he thinks that in that movie what he's saying is so ridiculous that he's like laughing at. He's like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this in a Disney movie because he's being so goofy. Oh my God, he's really good in that movie. He's also amazing at Game Night. Just one of the many great performances in that movie too. So I didn't realize he was in this movie. Now I'm excited again. You've brought me hope.
Yeah. His Aladdin character is getting a Disney Plus show that he is also starring in.
Is he really? What is happening? What's going on?
Sorry, it's not a show, it's a film. So he's getting a whole at least 90 minutes of that character.
What is happening? I mean, I'll watch it. That sounds hilarious. I can't believe Disney is actually doing that. Are you sure? It's not April Fool's Day.
This was they announced it almost over a year ago. It was like
it's happening.
When the hype came out a couple months after they announced the sequel um, for the live action film. And then when Disney was like, "Oh, look at all these things we're going to have coming to Disney Plus," because turns out we can't have a streaming service that just has literally one show. Uh, so yeah, this is like somewhere in development. I would imagine it's probably been waylaid by COVID a little bit, but it hasn't
Wow.
been canceled. So
Yeah, literally a report from Variety. I don't know what's happening in this world anymore. That's
it
amazing.
was because it was pretty controversial at the time. Because the actor who plays Aladdin in that movie was like, I haven't been getting offers, like I haven't been getting auditions, and I was in a movie that made $1 billion. And then literally like the day after he went viral for that Variety article came out, and it was like, this random character in Aladdin is getting his own movie on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that's not a good look, especially because I feel like the one thing that everyone liked about the new Aladdin movie was because, like, hey, we're not whitewashing at this time. I mean, we have Guy Ritchie as the director, so maybe not that's not ideal, but we have an all-area cast. We're look at all this inclusion that we're doing. And I thought that was great, and I really like Mina Masood as well, who played Aladdin. I thought he was really good. So it was really surprising when he was like, yeah, I can't get anything, like I can't get any jobs, which is just bizarre to me. So yeah, maybe they should chill on Billy Magnuson for a little bit, even if that does sound like the dumbest idea that I kind of really want to watch.
Even if it sounds just perfect.
Are you interested in talk about any of these other movies here? Anything
Yeah, a little
interesting?
bit. So unless you have just a ton to say on Peter Rabbit 2, um,
Yeah, we can move on.
probably
Just
skip that one.
get James
Um,
Corden out of my face. I'm done.
Ghostbusters Afterlife got pushback as well, and that one is something that I'm cautiously optimistic about. I think the last Ghostbusters was obviously pretty controversial, like 5 years ago. I think it was fine. Like it felt really cheap in a lot of ways, but I think like the charisma of the leads really sold it. But this one, they're like trying to get back to basics to a certain degree. I mean, you have Finn Wolfhard, who's just kind of the go-to sci-fi child star right now. And then you have Paul Rudd, who's just the go-to human right now. And so I feel like it's got some promise, and
Human.
you're bringing back most of the original cast, with the exception of Rick Moranis, as far as cast members who are still living. So that'll be cool to like see everybody back. They called Bill Murray's 1-800 number, and apparently he was interested. So I'm excited to see like if they can breathe some new life into this. Hopefully, it won't be another Men in Black International, but I will definitely my butt will be in a seat when this comes out.
Yeah, and if it's bad, the Afterlife subheading jokes will write themselves because they'll just be like, "Oh, like Dead on Arrival," haha, and it'll be terrible. And there'll be 100 articles that are written that something like that, and it'll be the worst. But um, yeah, I was kind of on the side of I didn't hate the 2016 Ghostbusters. There was just like a steaming pile of like trash that came along with that, like the discourse in that movie that was just so uninteresting. And it was like, can women be funny? Like, yes, like of course they can. Let's all relax and be better people. Let's not talk about this movie in this way. But I thought it was fine for what it was. I wasn't really mad about it in either way. But I can't say I'm really interested in seeing another Ghostbusters movie. I feel like all of that discourse just really tired me out. So I just don't feel like I want to watch another Ghostbusters movie. But I don't know. I mean, like you said, Paul Rudd, one of the best living humans. So I'm here for it. Maybe if it's okay.
Yeah, I mean it's something that I'm not like, yes, I will just obsess about this movie and plan on seeing it multiple times, but I'm like I'm kind of intrigued. I've never been just a huge Ghostbusters fan in general. I like the first one. I have somewhat vague memories of the second one, so I'm not, I'm not hating on this movie or anything.
Yeah, it's just that I feel like that was such a dark time for just film discourse because Twitter was, I feel like, was really starting to ramp up in the lead up to that movie back in like 2015 when the trailer came out. And there was the infamous thing with all of the YouTube hate that the trailer got, and yeah, it was just it was just not cool. And and then the movie came out and it was just like a studio comedy. And there was really nothing, it was much ado about nothing. And the movie was fine. And a lot of people were just being awful online and couldn't just needed to find their chill. So, I'm hoping that we just don't have to deal with any of that this time around. So, I mean, I don't know. Twitter got rid of Trump, so maybe we won't need to deal with it. Maybe there's some better guardrails on the discourse this time.
One can only hope. Yeah, so there's that. Then Tom Holland's Uncharted movie, which I can't really say I'm excited for. As someone who plays a fair amount of video games, I've never really gotten into Uncharted. The first game, in my opinion, sucked just a lot and was just really broken. And I just never had the initiative to play any of the others, so I just am pretty apathetic towards Tom Holland's Uncharted just because it is an Uncharted movie, but I'm sure it'll be Sony's Indiana Jones and it'll be fun and quippy.
Yeah, I have no connection to Uncharted. I never played any of the video games or anything like that. And this movie has been in development hell for like 2 decades, I think, at this point, right? There's been so many different directors attached, so many main stars attached to it, where it sounded like this movie was just destined to be not good, just for how long and how in the news it's been about how many pushbacks there have been and things like that in development. So, with this one, it's just never really been on my radar. I'm kind of just been like, yeah, I'll see it whenever it comes out. Now that Tom Holland's in it, I like him enough, so we'll see. But I really can't say I was ever too big on this one.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So Mark Wahlberg was originally set to star in this movie way back, like whenever it started development. And then that role went to Tom Holland, and now Marky Mark is like the older, like almost uncle character in in the movie now. So it's funny to see him like still be in it, but be in a drastically different role.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm more interested in, outside of what Tom Holland does in the MCU, I'm interested to see what he does in his non-franchise roles, because there's that Cherry movie that's coming out on Apple TV Plus that was directed by the Russo brothers, and I haven't really loved their stuff outside of the MCU as directors, but movie looks diving into a different side of himself as an actor, so I'm interested for that. But yeah, I feel like I'm just gonna wait and see on this one. For all the love that I had, or the emotions that I had leading up to No Time to Die, I'm a total flatline on Uncharted. I got nothing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm admittedly biased against it because of the experience I had with the games, but I'm like, yeah, it's a thing. This is a movie. But I am excited for the Kingsman. So I loved Kingsman. It came out when I was in high school, so I was like right at the perfect age for it. I worked at a movie theater at the time, so I didn't have to pay for tickets. So I saw it like 4 or 5 times in theaters. Like the first one, I just loved it. The second one is there, but the Kingsman looks pretty interesting. And we've joked a lot about how this is kind of the new Mutants, in the sense that it's just been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So this is kind of similar to No Time to Die, and I think it was supposed to have come out in 2019 as well, when it was originally the Untitled Kingsman 3. But now they moved it into a prequel, and moved it around a little bit, and then COVID hit and it got moved around a little bit more. So now it's being pushed back to August, and they just keep teasing us with this movie because it's always like just a couple weeks before. So we were supposed to have, been able to see this, I believe, over Valentine's Day weekend, and now it's 6 months away from us again.
Yeah, this is one I was interested in, because I'm kind of like you, where I was also in high school when the first Kingsman came out, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like that was like a total like late high school, early college dude movie that it hit me at the right time too, and I thought it was great. It's like unbelievably obnoxious. I don't know if you've watched it recently, but I feel like the actors involved are they know what movie they're in, and I don't know, Colin Firth just murdering a bunch of like West Baptist Church lookalikes and to Freebird is like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. So yeah, and then same thing, Kingsman 2 is also there. It's a movie that I didn't quite like. It became so self-aware of its obnoxiousness that I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. There's too much Elton John in this movie. Just being nuts. It was too much for me. But anytime Ray Fiennes gets to play a charming fella who also gets to punch some people, that just sounds lovely to me. It's like if his character from the Grand Budapest Hotel could fight, which is kind of what I get from this, because he's doing the same like charming voice and everything. And it's Matthew Vaughn coming back to direct it, so I think there is some good stuff with it. But I think we're in a point with Disney where they're still figuring out what they want to do with kind of the more, not like hard-edged Fox stuff, because Kingsman is the Kingsman, but they're R-rated movies, and they're definitely hyper violent. I think they're still figuring out what to do with those. And there was a horror movie that came out last year called The Empty Man, which Spencer Henderson wrote like a piece for the site, a really glowing review for it, and they just dumped it in theaters. No one saw it. I don't think it has much of a reputation at all at this point, but there's starting to be some murmurs of people who are like, this movie's actually really, really good and you should see it. And I feel like they're in that mode with this as well, and some of their other more adult leaning stuff, where they're like, yeah, this doesn't really fit the Disney Plus mold. We can't put this next to Soul on the ticker on our homepage, because all the little kids will get confused. But we don't want to just dump it on Hulu, because that might not be as good of an opportunity for us. So I feel like there's a couple of these where like, I don't know quite what to do with this yet. Maybe we try re-editing it or something. I don't know, but I want to see this movie. I hope they don't screw it up. The trailer I thought looked really delightful and fun. So when that trailer came out like 5 years ago. So
yeah,
I would love to see this movie.
It's nice to see Gemma Arterton come back to like big name movies after like a decade of just being gone. Because she was like, there's a period in like 2010 where she was just in a ton of big studio tentpole stuff, and then she just kind of disappeared and has been doing small stuff for the past decade. So it's nice to see her just like doing things. I mean, Charles Dance is in this movie. I'll show up for anything that Tywin Lannister does, so I'm excited to see that. And then just like in the trailer, all the stuff that they do with Rasputin, who's just an incredibly fascinating character, just in the nonfiction world, just like being like Rice Ifan's take on Voldemort, it feels like almost. So I'm excited to see that. As he actually fights Voldemort, since Ralph is in this movie too.
Yeah, there you go. I love Gemma Arterton, and she's been in a lot of great smaller movies over the last few years. She's been doing a lot of good work. It's just not necessarily in like your Kingsman and stuff like that. But I love her. So anything she's in, it's just lovely to see her. Yeah, this is the one. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep my emotions in check for all of these movies and all other movies that get pushed back until we actually get to see them. But if I had to put my thumb on any of them that I'm really looking forward to, it would be one of them. This would be one of them, but we'll see. Who knows?
See, the thing that I really like about the Kingsman and just Matthew Vaughn in general is that he's normally just like so ludicrously just like out there with his movies that even when they're bad, they're still just really, really good. Which I think is why I like Kingsman, the original Kingsman, so much. Because there's a lot of just like really stupid things in it, but there's just like explosions and yelling and Freebird, and then people getting shot in really creative ways, and you're like, hell yeah, thank you, Matthew.
He kind of belongs to the Guy Ritchie school of fast talking UK director. Makes a lot of sleek
yeah
movies that a lot of bros really like. kind of, he's in that mold too. I think he actually worked with Guy Ritchie on a couple of those movies too, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I like his stuff too. He's fun. So who knows? Who knows when this will actually come out?
It'll be here eventually. I hope.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, that's kind of all the big stuff that's been pushed back. And then we did get the Godzilla v Kong trailer this morning. If you're listening to this on Sunday, which is probably unlikely because we don't post it till Monday. But the Godzilla v Kong trailer came out, and as someone who just absolutely could not stand Godzilla King of the Monsters, I'm very mixed on this movie because on one hand, if you put a giant monkey and a giant lizard and make them punch each other, then I'm going to be interested. But on the other hand, the trailer also gave me a lot of the convoluted, like, technology, corporations are evil vibes that King of the Monsters spent way too much time making poor arguments over. And so I feel like we're going to get more of the same. It's just going to be two different monsters punching each other. But I also really want to watch those monsters punch each other. So even if I hate this movie, I'm excited to go see it.
Yeah, and so this movie, even before COVID, was pushed back for like a few months because of extensive reshoots. So I feel like everyone makes a big deal over reshoots. That happens in all these big movies. There's always pickups that need to happen, and they're not a big deal. Every single Marvel movie does reshoots, and they're never an issue. But with this one, when you see things like they're moving back the release date, and they have to reshoot a lot of different things and just kind of work on the script in production, that's never a good idea. That's never a good sign. So I was always a little concerned for this movie, but I mean, this is one of the HBO Max, Warner Brothers things, so we're getting this movie in March. It's going to happen. So we'll see. But yeah, I feel like this trailer kind of, it kind of gives you King of the Monsters vibes with, I think, a slightly better action. Because I feel like one of the big gripes with that movie was like, I would love to see all this action, but it
was boring as hell.
Yeah, and it's like there's snow like covering the action. It's all really, really dark. I think in this one, like, had a cool, looks like a cool fight where Kong is on the boat, and you have Godzilla in the water, and it's actually like there's light in it. There's light, so you can see it, which looks great. And then there's the fight where I don't know if maybe that's like South Korea or something like that, but they're in the skyline with all of the neon lights, which looks really cool. So it's like, they're figuring out ways to make this look clear, but also stylish and not have all the fights look the same. So I'm here for it. So if the human stuff doesn't get too in the way, then I will be fine with this movie, and I'll watch it and won't hate it like I did with King of the Monsters. I didn't hate that movie as much as you did, I don't think. But we'll see. I think it'll be fun. I wonder if we'll kind of all be happier to have this movie just because we haven't had a big dumb CGI fest like this in quite a long time. Even Wonder Woman wasn't that movie there's a lot of excess in that movie, but it wasn't like crazily bombastic. There was only a few action scenes in that movie. Whereas this one it just looks like it's balls to the wall, 300 million, let's go. So, and like, what is that one? The one final shot in the trailer where it's Godzilla's shooting his atomic breath, and Kong has like a makeshift like scythe. I'm like, yes, this looks so stupid. I'm ready. Well, I'm ready for all of this.
And I think overall, the Monsterverse has been pretty solid. Like Godzilla got a lot of praise when it came out, just for like being a lot more grounded compared to the Zemeckis Godzilla about, that would have been 15 years before or so, where Godzilla was just a T-Rex for some reason. And then I think Kong Skull Island was a really good Jurassic Park ripoff that delivered on a lot of just like the monster kills. Like there's in particular like one shot where the like bamboo spiders like stick their little bamboo feet through people's throats. So like I really enjoyed Kong Skull Island. I witnessed King of the Monsters, and don't ever intend to witness it again. But Godzilla versus Kong, I'm solidly excited for. I just want to see things punch each other in a theater, and I don't think that's too much to ask for.
My wish for the longest time is we basically get a silent film, like a 90-minute silent film where it's just one long fight between Godzilla and Kong, and that would be the most beautiful thing ever. Because we've gotten, I feel like, especially in the American versions of Godzilla and Kong movies, we've gotten so far from what these monsters mean. Like Godzilla obviously was in the aftermath of Hiroshima and all of the fear that came out of that, where now it's right, like you said before, where it's just very convoluted ideas about like, oh, who are the true monsters and all of this, and it's all just the worst. It's all, there's like 20 million humans running around. They're all like screaming about like their family problems, and it's just the worst, and you don't care about any of it. So if we're going to get so far away from what these monsters mean, then I just want to go full on. Let's just have them fight for 90 minutes. That's all I care about. So
Yeah.
it doesn't look like we're getting that in this movie, because you got like Alexander Skarsgård is in there. A bunch of, it looks like Millie Bobby Brown came back too. There's just so many different humans in this that we're probably going to have to deal with a lot of dumb drama stuff for a very long time.
Yeah, and we were talking about before we got on the movie Underwater that came out last year, and how it has just like no lead up. It just gets you straight into the chaos. And I really wish that these movies would just do that, and just, you know what, I don't need to spend 20 minutes learning Millie Bobby Brown and her family's backstory. Just give me the atomic breath right away, and then just keep going off that momentum.
Because there was a big Godzilla movie. I think it was called Shin Godzilla that came out in 2016. That was from Japan, and that movie was very much, we're just gonna shoot this as, there's no really any big main characters in this. It's just Godzilla shows up, and we're gonna deal with this as if it's real life, and we have to deal with a lot of government bureaucracy and getting motions passed to act on this. And it was very much like more of a scientific look at kind of how we have to deal with this monster. And I feel like I would much prefer that rather than like, yeah, like this sweeping stuff about like Millie Bobby Brown, not like Vera Farmiga not loving Millie Bobby Brown enough or something like that, or like a broken home. Like that stuff just, you can, like, obviously that stuff works, but it's been so bad in these movies. And I really didn't like Kong Skull Island very much. Is another one where Tom Hiddleston didn't look like he really cared very much, and Brie Larson was clearly, that was her get my paycheck after my Oscar, which is like cool for you, get your money. I have no problem with that, but it just didn't look, those characters weren't particularly well written, and they didn't really bring much of note to those characters, I thought. But I did like Godzilla decently enough. Kind of the same issue where Elizabeth Olsen and Quicksilver, whatever, I can't remember, think of his actual name.
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. How they're pretty bland in that movie, but I thought the direction was really cool in that movie. The framing was really fun, and even if it did tease you out on the fights a little too much, I enjoyed what that movie was after. But this movie just looks like it's like bombastic and wild. So who knows? I'm just hoping we don't have to deal with too much extra junk thrown in there.
Yeah. What I really liked about Kong Skull Island was that one scene where the guy like gets ready for his big like heroic Vietnam death, where he's actualized. He's like, I'm gonna kill this monster for everybody, and the thing just yeets him into a cliff like after he's pulled all these grenades out.
I forgot about that. That was a good scene.
I want more of that. If that's all this movie is, then I'm there.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting because the Monsterverse like has never really had time to assess itself. So you had Godzilla, which was supposed to be fairly standalone at first, and then you had Kong Skull Island, which I feel like just kind of came out of nowhere. And then you had Godzilla, where they're trying very hard for the shared universe and trying to bring everything together. But the issue was that Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and even Kong underperformed to a certain extent. But they were already so far along in the Godzilla v Kong process that they're like, well, we've already spent money. We can't unspend money now. So it'll be interesting to see like how the franchise goes forward, especially because this is going to be a hybrid release. So if you're looking to make money, this isn't really the way to do it. And with a franchise that's already questionable financially, it'll be interesting to see if we get anything else or if it just kind of ends with Godzilla v Kong and goes the way of the well-beloved Dark Universe from Universal.
Yeah, King of the Monsters did not do very well. I think it made less than 400 million worldwide, and the budget was like around 200 million. So that movie just did not perform particularly well, and they haven't made any announcements past Godzilla vs Kong. So there's definitely a lot riding on this, and obviously it's a big HBO Max release. I think we have a few other HBO Max releases. We have the Little Things coming out this coming week, the Denzel serial killer movie, and a few others first. But I'm interested to see what happens here, because I think as soon as Wonder Woman dropped on HBO Max, there was the release where they already greenlit Wonder Woman 3, and they were going to move forward with that. So obviously that performed pretty well for whatever standards they have, because we don't know, because we can't see any of the data, which is really annoying still. So I'm interested to see if on the heels of this release, if we see any news outlets break that there's going to be more of these movies. But also, I don't really know what you do from here. I guess you just bring in more of the monsters, but I feel like this is kind of like a culmination in a lot of ways.
You bring in Donkey Kong, and it's Godzilla versus Kongs.
Sure, why not?
But yeah, that's Godzilla v Kong. And then we'll dive into WandaVision, because that is maybe TV, maybe Marvel movie, something. It's we're in that weird hybrid zone where you have movie characters actually in a TV show, and then presumably going back to the movies when this is all over. So the third episode was Brady Bunch themed, which I thought was kind of nice. I wasn't familiar with the Brady Bunch at all, so I was just kind of like, I don't get the format, but I think this had some really good jokes. I like that they're continuing to just stick to a style per episode, and like this is the decade, the vibe, and the show that we're going for. And I think they pulled it off really well. Like 3 episodes in, and I have relatively few complaints. They teased us with more of like the secretness about what's going on a little bit more in depth. So I think we'll start getting some more concrete answers in the weeks to come. But for right now, I'm pretty happy with what's there.
Yeah, we've gotten in the mode where each of these episodes has been like, oh, we're going to do like a cute little spoof of this era of TV. And then, oh, there's some evil coming. There's some evil out there. Tune in next week to see what happens. And then the next episode is just more like spoofy stuff, which I don't mind too much, because this episode was like 33 minutes again, and 8 of that was credits. So if I have to sit through 25 minutes of Elizabeth Olsen just being delightful. I thought she was great in this episode, by the way. And then Paul Bettany cracking more jokes, then I'm okay with it, right? I can't get too mad about it. But I think episode 4 is there's a lot riding on it for me. I would like them to develop out more of what's actually happening here, rather than do more of like 20 minutes of spoof than 5 minutes of teaser for whatever's coming next. Because I feel like I'm okay with it now, but I feel like if they do, I will start to get a little more impatient if we follow the same path again. So, but I don't think that'll happen, because this is 9 episodes. We're coming on this episode 4 next, so I think a lot of this will be pushed into motion, and things will start to get more out of whack and interesting. But I think they did play it out a little more this time, because we got more weirdness where it looks like there was like more glitches happening in the Matrix, where you had Herb, the next door neighbor, just like he was sawing through the cinder blocks, which was pretty funny. And then obviously there's like the tense conversation with Catherine Hahn as well. And then you had the discussion with Tiana Paris and Elizabeth Olsen, where she was talking about Ultron and Pietro. So there was a little more this time. So I think we are going to get a little more in episode 4. But I like you said, I don't have a ton of crazy complaints. I'm just thinking of it in the big picture, and if it starts to bother me later on. But I do like it. I thought this was fun. It was a fun episode.
Yeah, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time they've even mentioned Pietro since like Age of Ultron when he died. Like I can't think of any other time in an
Yeah.
MCU movie where they were like, "Hey, remember this character who was like the big emotional climax of the previous film?" Or what? That's three Avengers movies ago. Um, so I appreciate the nod, but it also just felt really random because I don't feel like we've ever even seen Scarlet Witch just like wrestle with that outside of that movie either. Which I thought was interesting. But it's nice to like ground her a little bit more because we talked about this last week. But you know, she and Vision are characters that we've seen quite a bit, but we don't really know much about. Like they just kind of do their powers and then say a little quip and move on. Sometimes with a Eastern European accent, sometimes without it. And then I do like that this one was a lot more focused on kind of pushing the boundaries of the simulation or matrix thing they're in. Because you did have like a little rewind moment with Vision where he like goes through this conversation and then it glitches and he goes back, and then you have Monica Rambeau getting yeeted from whatever that thing was, and then just like waking up and kind of connecting it to the outside world a little bit. But I mean, we still have like two of the main casts that we haven't even met yet from some of the previous Marvel movies. So I'd like to see them worked in a little bit more. Not just because I love Randall Park, but because I think it'd be nice to get a little more context for the outside world. As much fun as we're having with the episode of the week kind of thing.
Yeah, it is really funny back to Quicksilver, where it's just because I feel like Ultron is one of those where I feel like Marvel fatigue started to set in with that movie because no one really loves Ultron. I feel like it's kind of bungled and thrown together and very slapdash. Joss Whedon has been on record where he thought like that production was just hellish to deal with, and he just sounded like he was miserable making that movie because it was, and that was a lot of this movie is setting up 10 other movies rather than functioning as its own thing. So when Quicksilver dies at the end of that movie, it means literally nothing. You were introduced to him and he has like a few quips throughout the movie, then he dies. So it doesn't really mean much to the overall story. And kind of what we talked about last week, where Scarlet Witch and Vision they've just always kind of been on the periphery for a lot of the Avengers movies and when they've showed up in things. So it is nice to kind of have Wanda to get her time, and I'm really warming up to Elizabeth Olsen. I think she's terrific, especially I thought, looking back on after watching this episode, I really liked what she did in the first two episodes more because I think she's subtly really really funny in these roles, and she's doing a lot of like little quirks I really like, and it's fun to actually get to hang out with her for a little bit. And I think if there was two characters that could do like this episode of the week thing, I think it's the smartest to do it with these two, so because you can just hang out with them and watch them connect rather than just, we haven't really seen much of that yet. So I love her, and then I love Paul Bettany as well. I think he's being really funny. So I'm interested. Definitely going to keep watching. Like I said, like it's 25 minutes a week, so it's really not bad. You can just instead of watching whatever you're going to watch on YouTube, you can just watch this instead. So I'm interested. I hope they change the formula like I said earlier, but I'm not too mad for right now.
Yeah, well, I'm curious because of the timing, if like the reason why we're kind of getting back into mentioning Pietro again and really getting to actually explore Scarlet Witch as a character a little bit more is because Marvel has the rights to her world again. Because she and Quicksilver were in this really weird deal where like they're Avengers, but they're more X-Men. So like Quicksilver was in the later three X-Men movies for the X-Men prequels, and then was in Age of Ultron but got killed because he was already in the X-Men movies. And so I'm curious to see if they kind of sat on her for a while because they didn't have the rights to a lot of the characters that would give her context. I mean, like her dad is Magneto, and you can't mention him in a Marvel movie until now. So it's like, they haven't been using all their resources, I guess, as far as her character goes. And now I feel like they probably have a little bit more freedom to do so.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think the main like Reddit theory is that, and it makes more sense now that we've watched this third episode. I was thinking this might be the case before, but it really made sense when you watched this episode where she has constructed a lot of this while that's happening because of the trauma that she dealt with Vision dying in Infinity War / Endgame. So she's created this artificial reality for herself to not necessarily cope, but just to hide from her trauma. So I'm interested to see if that plays out that way. Because I think it's an interesting, possibly interesting look in how we deal with trauma, or it could be a really bad hackneyed version of how we deal with trauma, depending on how they play it. So we'll see. But I really love Elizabeth Olsen. I'm getting a lot more appreciation for her as an actress, and I think we talked about this last week as well, where you always like her and stuff, even when it's outside of the MCU. You think, yeah, she's good. I like her. She's charming enough. But I just think she's really funny in this. So I hope that they can take this in an interesting way next week and the prior weeks or the next weeks after that, because it feels like I feel already more connected to her and Vision. So I hope that this works out correctly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of non-Marvel things I've seen her in. And the only thing that I'm coming to mind with is Wind River, which I really enjoyed, which was her and Jeremy Renner.
She was in the terrible Spike Lee version of Old Boy.
That is true.
Yeah. She's just been in a lot of stuff. She's been acting for quite a while, and I just never had much to say about her. I thought she was very charming, but now it's just she's really good, and she was on Godzilla, like we mentioned before.
Oh yeah.
But I just really like her. I think she's really, really funny when she's doing the breathing exercises. When her baby comes, she gets pregnant in a day. The baby comes. I thought that was really funny. Her doing the breathing exercises. Just a lot of where Paul Bettany got to do more of like the physical comedy in the last episode. I thought she was doing that a little more this time around, and it was pretty goofy and fun. So, she was great in Ingrid Goes West that came out a few years ago. The Aubrey Plaza kind of like incredibly dark comedy. And I thought she plays this Instagram influencer, and she's like so vapid and fake, and it's so good. She's tremendous in that movie. So, but I like her. I think she's great.
Yeah. So that is WandaVision episode 3, and I'm assuming we'll probably talk about episode 4 next week. And then let's just go ahead and run through the Netflix top 10. There's nothing too crazy this week. Pink Fong and Baby Shark has dropped a little bit, which is disappointing because Nick decided not to watch it. But,
do we have to do a Pink Fong and Baby Shark spoiler pod next week?
I'm going to assume they go to space. I don't want to give anything else away.
They have an adventure in space.
But in the number 1 spot was Homefront. Number 2 was Cutthroat City. Number 3, The White Tiger. Number 4, Outside the Wire. Number 5, The Vanished. Number 6, Penguins of Madagascar, the movie. Number 7, We Can Be Heroes. Number 8, Pink Fong and Baby Shark Space Adventure. Number 9, Death of Me. And number 10, Sightless. So none of these, save one, are anything that we really have a ton to say on. But I'll let you take it away with The White Tiger.
Yeah, The White Tiger was the big Netflix release this week. And it's interesting because I don't know if we talked about this on the pod, but Netflix coming out with their big video to announce that they're coming out with like some kind of big time movie every single week this week, which is just wild to me. So even with the pandemic, they have just all this stuff in the can ready to go. But The White Tiger is this week's. It's the Netflix movie of the week this time around. And it's directed by Ramin Barani, who did that 99 Homes movie with Michael Shannon and Andrew Garfield a while back. Very, very good director. I like what I've seen from him. I really like the movies he's done. White Tiger is a really interesting movie. It's it's a combination of a lot of different things. There's a little bit of a Scorsese rise and fall there, a little bit of Parasite in there as well. So it takes place in India, and it's about this kid who lives in a lower caste system, and he kind of he finagles his way into becoming a driver for a super wealthy family, and so he tags along with them. He's their servant, and like cleans them, and like is like giving them massages and things like that, and is just trying to make it in the world. And I think that this movie is a really good encapsulation of the suffocating nature of poverty, especially in India, where the income inequality is just like absurd when you go from like people in the lower castes to the richest of the rich. And I think this movie plays that really well, because this kid comes from this just really remote village, and then he's around all the rich people, but obviously he has no benefits from that, and he's only there because they decide he's there. So this movie goes and goes, and you can see where he starts to get corrupted a little bit, and something really shocking happens halfway through, and he becomes much more of just a complicated character. And I really don't want to spoil it from there, but things take a turn for the worse. And I think where his character ends up, it's a really good encapsulation of the movie's ideas of poverty and trying to improve your standing in the world, and how, if that's not entirely possible, when just staying to legal means. So yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this movie. I think it's really good. It's probably 20 minutes too long, and there's a few other things that I'm not a huge fan of it in there. There's a annoying framing device where this guy is explaining his life in an email, which is pretty lame, but I think it's really worthwhile. So I would check it out. And it's Priyanka Chopra Jonas is in this movie, and she's also the executive producer. And it seemed like she was big in getting this movie made. But I had never really understood her as an actress before. I thought she's always just been fine, but never very breathtaking or very noteworthy to me. But I thought she was terrific in this movie. So that's just another thing. But yeah, this movie's really good. I implore people to check it out instead of Pink Fong and Baby Shark's Space Adventure.
Does it have anything to do with the White Tiger King, Joe Exotic?
No, nothing. Unfortunately, maybe they're setting that's the sequel, so they're gonna bring in, because isn't Nick Cage doing like a show as Exotic? Isn't that happening? So maybe they combine them in the sequel.
Well, Joe Exotic.
So it's this guy's story and Nicolas Cage in the next movie.
Joe Exotic was so convinced that he was going to be part of Trump's pardons on the final day in office that he had a car like waiting for him outside the jail that he's currently housed in, and he never got pardoned. So
remember the Tiger King phenomenon? That feels like that was 5 years ago. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, that's what's going on Netflix. Nothing too crazy. So let's go ahead and wrap up with what we've been watching in general. So I made it a goal the week after Christmas, in between Christmas and New Year, that I was going to try and read all 7 Harry Potter books in 7 days. I failed. I got through 4.5 and then realized that I had other things to do and I couldn't just sit and read all day. And so, but I finished that. I finished those up last week, and so I decided to watch through all the movies, and was just pretty pleased. This is the first time in probably 2 or 3 years that I've actually sat down and watched them. I watched them with some friends last year, but that's where everybody's just kind of having a conversation, and there's a movie on in the background, but nobody's actually paying much attention to it. So sitting down and just kind of returning to it was a lot of fun. I really, really like Christopher Columbus's first 2 movies, which I know a lot of people just don't hold in as high esteem. But I really like just how magical the environment feels, even if I feel like he does just kind of paint by numbers as far as adapting goes in a lot of places, and some of the side characters feel a little bit flat, but everything just feels really magical and whimsical. And then you get into the later ones, and I think the movies do a solid job of aging with their audience. Both both as the books did, coming out over the span of 10 years, and the movie's doing the same over another set of 10 years. So I think they mature pretty well. I think the latter four don't quite hold up as well as the first four, just from some just kind of bland directorial choices. And it's really weird having one single director for the last four movies, because those four seem to lack foresight the most, even given the fact that three of those movies came out after the books were already finished. There's just some things that are omitted that are important later on in the books, and you're like, well, or later on in the movies even, and you're like, why wasn't this here? This is literally the same team with all the information they could have about this story, and we're not going to talk about, you know, specific characters like Dobby coming back, or like specific tools like the mirror coming into play, or, you know, the most interesting parts of the sixth book, which they completely omit from the movie. And so Voldemort has almost no context when you finally have a movie where he's at the forefront in the seventh and eighth. So they're not all huge winners. I don't think any of them are bad, but it was just a pleasant way to spend a week watching wizards shoot lightning goo at each other.
Yeah, I think I'm not a huge David Yates fan, who directed the last four and did Fantastic Beasts. I don't have anything terrible to say about his direction. I don't know what his style is as a director. He's one of those that just kind of shoots the script. And there's nothing really like interesting about how the way he moves the camera, frames a scene, or anything like that. I thought some of the scenes in a lot of his movies just looked like really dark, and not in terms of content. Like, it's just hard to see things, and they get like really
Snyder
brown.
Vision.
Yeah, it's definitely like Snyder adjacent in the way he, like, the color grading is, and it looks kind of ugly in a lot of ways. And I feel like it also kind of zaps out some of like the quote unquote magic from each scene, because you would think it'd be more fanciful and fun and bright, but it's like a lot of blues and grays and browns. So I'm not a huge fan of his direction. I think those last few movies work kind of in spite of him, just because it's just interesting and it's satisfying at watching everything come together in the end. But I haven't really watched any of the Harry Potters in a while. I'm interested to see. I feel like my taste has changed so much in the past like 3 years or so that I don't really know. Like, I'd love to go back and see if I actually like feel the same way about these movies as I used to.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it feels like they tried to really reinvent the franchise and do almost a soft reboot with the third one. So you have Alfonso Cuarón coming in after being like bullied into it by Guillermo del Toro, which is a fun story to read up on. But he really changed it and kind of took it out of just the whimsical, like, over fantastic world that Chris Columbus did. And I think he matured it in a lot of ways. And then Mike Newell, I think, kind of perfected that format, or at least the tone of it. And then David Yates just kind of copy and pasted is what it feels like. Just with, you know, fewer and fewer colors, particularly in the sixth movie, which the back half is just like black and white almost. But I do think the eighth movie just kicks ass. Like, it's just an hour and a half long fight at Hogwarts coming after the Gringotts chase. Like, it's just action. And I think it lands really well. You get a lot of, you know, the defining moments of the franchise, you know, with the Snape revelation and just kind of Harry's choices in the final 30 minutes of the movie. So I think the eighth one works really well and is really high up there in the franchise for me. But as far as like 5, 6, and 7 go, I don't think they hold up as well, which I think is especially disappointing given how much I like the sixth book and a lot of how Rowling really comes into her own as she's writing the fourth, the sixth, and the seventh books in particular. I think that's where she really established herself as a decent writer. And yeah, I just don't think they came together as well as they could, but I think they're all fun and all very, very rewatchable and very cringy when it comes to relationships. Those scenes are always just really awkward, but
Yeah, they're not great. It's not ideal. And then we had 7 and 8, which led to the horrible trend of each book series that comes out, we have to split the last movie into 2 parts. And there's a few of those where it was like Hunger Games, and there's a few others where like they're just not movies, because it's like one movie is all exposition and then the other is all action. And I feel like also 7 and 8 kind of struggle with that a little bit too, because 7 is just a lot of camping, you know, and then 8 is all action, which I think they pulled off reasonably well. But I would have loved to see that just turn into like an epic like 3.5 hour movie. I thought that'd be really really cool. But yeah, I think it's a feat of it's an amazing feat of like bringing it home, and I feel like all Harry Potter fans really feel fairly satisfied by those movies. So that's kind of a great feat in of itself.
Remember Divergent 4?
Oh god, whatever happened? They were supposed to make that on a TV show, right? And it just didn't happen because no one cared.
Yeah, so Divergent 3 didn't make nearly as much money as they needed to make a Divergent 4 like an actual movie. And so they announced it was going to be a TV show without telling like Shailene Woodley or Miles Teller or any of the people you need to be in the movie. And then there was an interview where Shailene Woodley was like, yeah, fuck that. And then that was it. It just ended.
Iconic. I love it. Yeah, I would like to go back and watch these at some point. I mean, there's always like the freeform like Harry Potter marathon where it's like the entire week of Harry Potter. So I'm sure I'll catch up with it again sometime soon.
Will that include the Divergent series? Or
No, unfortunately, I'm going to put that off to the side for now.
but yeah, that's what I've been watching. Not really sure what I'll get into next. But what have you been checking out this week?
I feel like I've learned recently that um, the comedy that I really enjoy is just pure absurdism. I feel like even the past 4 years, it's kind of like I feel like comedy has been in a weird spot where it's like, what are we supposed to laugh at? Or like I feel like most comedians are doing more serious work. Um, but I've realized recently that I just like when things are insane and balls to the wall and so nutty. So I went back to the Don Hertzfeldt well. Just I think he's quickly turning into one of my favorite directors, and his short World of Tomorrow 3 was my favorite movie of last year. But I watched two of his shorts this week that are just like chef's kiss. They're just wonderful. So the first one it's called Rejected, and this was actually nominated for Best Animated Short back into 2000, or I might have been like the 2001 Academy Awards. But it's hilarious. It's a bunch of clips of rejected animated commercial bits that were they were rejected by like whatever company, and they're just all incredibly violent, and they become more and more violent and unhinged. And it's because the animator himself is losing his sanity. So like the internal logic of all of these shorts just start to collide and become just way more insane. And it's kind of almost like clip show for 12 minutes, but it's one of the funniest things you'll ever watch in your life. I was cackling so hard. It's just the most insane. It's just pure insanity for 10 minutes, and it's on YouTube. So I recommend people watch that one. But the other one I watched was called The Meaning of Life, and this takes the absurdism up to like, I don't know, like 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. It's just so it's a hilarious take on like, I feel like we've seen a couple of these movies that try to like explain what life is, and this is just like a complete rebuke against that, where it's the first couple of minutes of it are just stick figures walking across a blank screen just yelling, like there's just yelling random things at each other, like it's just all non sequiturs, and then it goes out into space and it's just random alien creatures also just like jabbering for 6 minutes, and then the short's over. It's so funny because I think it captures that spirit of like trying to find meaning of life is just inherently ridiculous, and it just gives you all of that ridiculousness up front. So it is so funny. So if anyone needs any good laughs, both of these, Rejected and The Meaning of Life, are both on YouTube. You can find them on Don Hertzfeldt's YouTube channel. They're just lovely. They're some of the funniest things you'll watch.
But do they split the final short into two shorts?
Yeah, and the second one is all action. The first bit is just them camping for 6 minutes, and then the second 6 minutes is just nutty stick person action.
Yeah, I love the Harry Potter franchise, but I'm glad we're finally out of the young adult craze phase. Like that was was a rough 10 years for a while there.
Yeah, and now I feel like the thing now is like the crazy erotic movies. So we had like 50 Shades, and now we have 365 Days, and the after movies. I don't know if we've talked about any of the after movies on here. Have you seen any of those?
No.
They are the worst things I've seen ever. They're so bad. But like all of those are like very toxic relationships, like for teens. And there's like explicit sex in all of them, but they're all just the worst. Especially 365 Days is just like the most insane movie, like maybe ever. So that's the next trend that we need to get rid of.
Let's just get rid of all trends.
Let's just get rid of movies. Should we just stop making this podcast?
It's cool though, because Harry Potter really kicked off two like Hollywood crazes. So they had the first one where they were like, well, what children's franchise can we like kick off the ground? So that's where you saw I guess it was more of a fantasy thing than it necessarily was children's. So you had like the Narnia movies coming out. The Lord of the Rings adaptations were already in the works around that time. And then you had like Bridge to Terabithia and all these like fantasy, the Spiderwick Chronicles and all these fantasy children's series. And then by the time you got to the end is kind of what you talked about with all the young adult movies, and you had like Twilight, and then everybody was like, what if we milked an extra movie out of this? And then to come back around, then Lord of the Rings, when the Hobbits were being made, is like, what if we made 2 extra movies out of this? And now here we are, 20 years after the first Harry Potter movie and 10 years after the last one, which just feels wrong.
I feel like Marvel and all their superhero movies just kind of cannibalize this, because I feel like everyone in those age groups generally likes superhero movies. So I wonder if that just kind of took up all the noise, where instead of like your Hunger Games movies and all that, we just have Captain America 7 instead,
Yeah, but it's kind of a shame because I really liked the Narnia movies, especially the first 2. Shout out to my boy Andrew Adamson, who directed 2 Shreks, 2 Narnias, and then just disappeared off the face of the earth. But Netflix had like that big deal they announced a couple years ago where they're going to try and remake all of them, which I think would be interesting to get past the big 2, which are kind of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian, and really explore the rest of the world. Because I think Narnia is something that's really fertile as far as franchising goes. I think even more so than Harry Potter would be, in the sense that like you can go out into the world and make an interesting story based more off the world than you can needing to rely on other characters, which I think is why, even with Fantastic Beasts and The Cursed Child, the Harry Potter franchise is always just trying to dip more into characters that are already there. Whereas something like Narnia is, featuring an ensemble of characters that hardly ever meet or interact with one another. And so it'd be interesting to see, that kind of fantasy explored in a little more detail. If Netflix,
I gotta be honest, that. I don't think I remember a single thing about the Narnia movies. I didn't read any of the books. That's just out of my view.
See, I grew up in a very Christian household, so we were allowed to read Narnia. My brother wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter, but they finally came around to it when I was a kid. I think the first one in particular holds up really well. Like it's really fun fantasy, and then the last hour is just like centaurs hitting each other with swords. Liam Neeson will like pop up with an anecdote every now and then. I think the second one is okay, and then the third one just is kind of there. So I would like to see it just have a bit more of a steady hand over the franchise, which Netflix is supposedly doing like a mix of TV and movies around it. So I'd like to see that at some point.
Cool. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, that's the end of my Narnia tangent. And that is pretty much wrapping up this week's episode of the podcast. So we'll be back next week, probably talking about more pushback release dates, more WandaVision, more whatever else we get into throughout the week. So remember, you can check us out online at moviebabble.com, and we will talk to you later.